Welcome to Tech in the Right Direction, the podcast. This week, I'll be speaking with Beth Attwood. Beth is Vice President, Growth Marketing for Nitro Inc., the document productivity company specializing in market-leading PDF, eSign, and digital identity solutions. With over 20 years' experience in technology marketing, Beth's had the privilege of working for leading brands such as Ingram Micro, Brocade, Veeam, and Nitro Software. She believes in leading with authenticity, challenging the status quo, and developing long-lasting connections with employees, partners, and customers alike. Beth is passionate about mentoring and supporting young women navigating their way through the tech industry. Her hope is that through sharing inspiration with a sense of humor, born of experience, she can make a positive difference to the new generation of female leaders. Welcome to the show, Beth. I'm so excited to have you on.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. So thank you for the invite.
Sure. Great. So, Beth, as a woman in tech, can you share with us your career journey and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. Well, I've got 25 years of experience working in the tech industry, which probably explains a lot of the grey hairs I'm now finding. So I spent my first 2 years in sales, or the dark side, as I like to call it. Sorry to all my sales friends that might be listening. And then I moved into tech marketing. So I've kind of worked in various roles across the marketing discipline, focused and wide, really. So I started out in campaign management. I went into channel marketing, customer, field marketing. I did a bit of marketing ops and brand and PR. And, I've had the privilege of practicing those skills with some sort of leading and challenger brands, really. I'm now Vice President of Growth Marketing at Nitro. And I love the role I'm in now because I feel like I'm giving something back a little bit more. So we help organizations measure an element of their sustainability. So it's always nice to feel like you're doing something a bit more rewarding. But, my career path hasn't always been a straight line. So, you kind of start at that base and that line then goes up until you get to where you are. It's sort of, and I think this is quite typical for women in tech, actually, it's sort of speckled with sideways moves and, promotions and a step down in places after maternity leave. And, so I've kind of moved around, and it has been not a straight line, as I said, but, it comes with its challenges. I'm a single mum and there's been long office commutes in my former career, but I'm so passionate about what I do. I love what I do. I enjoy getting up to do what I do. And that drives me, I think, even in the most challenging times of my career.
That is so important to love what you do. And very few people can say that, that it motivates you to wake up every morning and show up and be the person that you're authentic. You're just who you are, and that's awesome. I love that.
Yes, I agree. I think it's so important to show up and be in a place that's safe to be your true self. So yes, I've been very fortunate and worked hard as well, of course.
Yes, of course. That's great. So you're very passionate, I know, about advancing women's careers because you've done that so well for yourself. Tell us more about that. Give us, some advice that our listeners could be inspired by as to how to advance their careers.
Well, when I started out in tech, it was a very different workplace experience for young women to what I hope young women find in the workplace today. So, but there's still so many challenges, and I'd love to give back a bit. I think when I first joined the workforce, I joined the tech industry, women were quite sexualized, really, both in kind of society and the workplace. And, I have just some dreadful stories of things I saw, of things I've experienced. And many women my age in the industry will certainly have the same. And I think the playing field has leveled to a degree. And certainly some of those issues that I faced, that women my age faced, is no longer tolerated, right? That thanks to the Me Too movement and the whistleblowing cultures, and that's great. So I think hopefully that element has gone to a certain degree, but it's certainly still tough to be a female in tech. And I
to
think,
grow, your career.
yeah, exactly. You still, there's so many hurdles, and I'm not sure if it's because the majority are still male, right? And
Mhm,
therefore, the rules and the culture has been built up around males. And whilst things
mhm,
still aren't tolerated in the way they were when I started out, they still exist. And I'd love,
mhm,
for future generations, my daughter maybe even, and for my son to be aware of the issues when they're
mhm,
entering tech, to feel more
mhm.
confident and to grow their voice, really find their voice and find their career path, and really help manage through the discrimination that I think still exists, unfortunately.
I think it does. It's not completely gone. And we talk about, in some cases, it's just unconscious bias, where people have their beliefs based on where they grew up or how they were raised or, many different things. And so those things you have to acknowledge and then make sure that you test them to make sure, is this true, what I'm thinking, or is this just a bias that I have? And we all have biases. So it could be that as well.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I guess some examples that I still see as a senior leader in tech, I still see some of these practices and would love to help sort of young women sort of be aware of them, give them perhaps insights I wished I'd had. And
Mhm,
I think a big takeaway for me is men are from Mars and women are from Venus.
mhm,
That's
mhm.
really holds true in every industry. But men are kind of wired differently from us,
Yeah.
in the most part. Yeah, and they aren't afraid to speak out. They seem to be born with this amazing confidence and they
Mhm,
understand their worth. And women have always had to kind of, not all women, but many women have to work towards understanding their place. They have to believe they're worth something before they speak. And I think that probably hinders a lot of our progress is
mhm,
women finding their voice and having the confidence to express themselves. And then there's, I think, the sheer discriminational factors that come in day to day. So, many women face the juggling act. Family combined with work, it's still a really real challenge because I think, let's face it, the women still do the
mhm.
majority of household organization, the childcare arrangements, most of that falls to the women. And we just keep seeing all these statistics in the press talking to professional female burnout. And we still don't help women maybe with that juggling that
Mhm,
inevitably takes place. And I mean, I've seen lots of examples, things like maternity leave. So, having a
mhm,
baby it's a very natural process. It's something that is very natural for many women to want to have children. Not all, but most.
mhm, mhm,
And I see, being overlooked. I mean, it's happened to me before, but being overlooked for promotion whilst you're
mhm,
on maternity leave. I know the States isn't a particularly long time that the US women have, but certainly Europeans have a lot more time on maternity leave. And, being cut off from the organization, missing out on, promotion ops that otherwise you might be considered for, having to re-earn your stripes, work doubly hard, all of that discrimination absolutely still exists. And I think it's
mhm.
up to the sort of leaders of today to change that, to keep in contact with those on maternity or paternity leave, if that's what they wish. It's to tell them about promotion ops coming up and to not consciously sort of discriminate against them because they're out of the organization for a period of time. All of that still exists. And I think there's definitely the balance is changing a bit. So parental
Mhm,
leave is available in many countries now that can be swapped between maternal and paternal, which is great.
mhm, mhm,
But I think it's changing the culture. Like, people, I think, are less accepting of fathers sort of taking that long-term paternity leave versus the woman. So we've still got a cultural way to go, I think, in terms of leveling that playing field. But I'm happy that some of the issues I face coming in, hopefully, are a thing of the past.
I hope so. I hope so because things have to change, and we need champions. We need leaders to make those changes for us, and we need to voice our opinion, which is really, really important. I think, like you said, our male counterparts have great, great confidence on anything. They speak with confidence. Anything they say, even if they don't have backup on it, we'll say it with confidence, so you believe them. And where women will always second guess ourselves, all the time.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, confidence is a big piece of how we can really get a voice, to make sure that we don't second guess ourselves. We don't have to be perfect in order to apply for a position. We don't have to have 100% of the qualities. A man has 60% and it's really okay. But a woman doesn't even apply for a position if it's 60%. So I think we're harder on ourselves than others, to be frank, because I just feel like we have to build that confidence, and we have to be engaged even when we're on maternity leave. This sounds terrible, but we have to be inquiring what's going on in the company during that time, so that you're taking your own career in your hands and you're not leaving it to somebody else, to get you there.
Absolutely. And that sort of, I think we question ourselves. And I often, if I'm sort of chairing a meeting, a man is never afraid to ask a question or speak up. But I will see some of my female team members, they'll come to me afterwards and say to me, "Oh, there was this point or this question I wanted to raise." And when I say to them, that would have been so helpful if you'd said that in the meeting, because actually that's a great point. And we could have gathered around that for a while, because actually that's really worthy of exploring. And they didn't have the confidence to speak out.
Yeah.
And it's such a shame, because we've got so much to bring, and I'd love to empower women to feel like, they don't have to be right on everything. They just need to speak up and have a voice.
Right.
Yeah.
I had to learn that many, many years ago. I had so many thoughts, and I would never have a voice at the table, because the men would just take over and they'd just go on. I was the only woman in the room in many cases. And then I learned, because when I bring it up on the side, everybody's like, "Wow, that's a great idea. Why didn't you say something?"
Yeah.
And so you kind of hear that over and over again. You realize, okay, I'm going to say something, and you're going to push yourself to be more confident and have that voice at the table. It is so critical.
It is. And I think building the confidence, whether you've been in, whether you're just joining the tech industry, or whether you're 5-10 years in, building that confidence is what gives you your powerful position, if you like. And it's such an interesting one. So as an example, when I recruit people for a role, the men coming in will always negotiate with me. There will always be at least one point they negotiate on, usually salary, sometimes roles, responsibilities, but they will always push me for more. Yet when I offer a role to a woman, 9 times out of 10 they won't ask me for anything extra. They'll take the salary that's given. Now I'm always so conscious of the gender pay gap, and I hope most modern day leaders are, of course. So I always try and get a balance across my team, but there are many leaders still that won't do that, and will try and get you for for the best price they can, if you like. And by not asking, you're sort of you're negating any opportunity to come in and get actually what you're worth.
Right.
And I've seen it changing slowly, probably over the last sort of 5 years. I think American women are a lot better at asking for what they want up front. I think European women find it a lot more difficult, and that might be a cultural thing as well. But I do see that slowly changing, but it's incredible the amount of people that sort of accept salary, accept responsibility, and come into the organization without even trying to ask for more or building a business case for more. And men do every single time. So the question I sort of ask women, certainly women in my team, is, if you don't ask, you don't get. And I think that's so important.
So important. I think you're spot on when you say that. But I don't think even the American women negotiate enough. Or, there might be a few that do, but really negotiate for what you're worth.
Yeah.
If you feel that you're not getting paid fairly, or maybe you deserve more, then you need to ask for it, because if you don't ask for it, you'll never get it, like you said. And so I think this kind of brings us into our next discussion about, what are some best practices of women negotiating from a powerful position, because you want them to come in with confidence and win.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts? Anything that you've had to do in your career that maybe stands out in negotiation?
Yeah, I think to negotiate in the first place, it's all about finding that powerful position. It's about
Mhm.
finding that confidence. So, I would say in terms of tips for negotiation, I would start off by kind of building that confidence as sort of your platform. So a couple of things, I've learned along the way. I wish I'd known when I entered, I suppose, the tech industry or any industry, of course, is that it's learning that everyone has a brand and a brand has an innate value. And by
Mhm.
building your brand, internally and if you can throughout the industry, by building that brand, you're in a much stronger position, both because you feel confident in yourself, because you know what you're about, you know what you're worth, but also, of course, externally through the industry when you're looking at new opportunities. And a former CIO once said to me, you never touch people so lightly that you don't leave a trace, and it's so true.
Mm.
And it's a
Mm.
it's a concept that I think if anybody from Gen Z is listening, they'll be much more familiar with. With the advent of social media, and they were born with a mobile phone in their hand. But what I found has been super helpful for me is I've picked, and I've done this through the kind of the course of my career, or certainly through the later stage of my career, is to kind of pick three words that you think best define you in the workplace. How do you want to show up in the
Mhm.
workplace?
Mhm.
And those three words are really helpful because in times of difficulty or when you need perspective, if you go back to your three words, you can kind of center on those as your core values, and they can sort of help guide you to a certain extent. And
Mhm.
in turn, of course, that helps in negotiation because you know who you are and you know what you're worth. And
Right.
those words sort of can grow with you. They can change as you kind of, obviously as an employee, as a person, you evolve. So they can absolutely change. But those three sort of give you a sense of your worth and like I said, sort of help guide you. And then I think with women, when it comes to negotiation, and it's terrible, isn't it, these generalizations, but I think it's true to say that we tend to be emotional.
Mhm.
And of course men can be as well, of course, but sometimes emotions are big, certainly when we're dealing with a lot at work
Mhm.
and of course
Mhm.
at home. So to be able to negotiate, you need to manage those emotions. And you know what, I think at 48, I don't think I've mastered that. But I've always been working towards it. I think the key is, before you go into the negotiation, is you need to understand your triggers, and you need to recognize when those, you're sort of coming across those triggers, and know how to calm yourself. You need to know how to take a space, how to breathe. Um, and need to recognize what those triggers are. So as you go into negotiations, you can recognize those triggers, you can manage your emotions as they come up. And I would say, even outside negotiations, understanding those triggers, when those emotions sort of bubble up, check
Mhm.
in with supportive colleagues, build that network around you, or a mentor that you trust, because it's good to show vulnerability. It's brave, it builds human connection, but you just have to be careful who you trust with your vulnerabilities, and
Mhm.
really, managing emotion is part and parcel of that. So stay calm, I suppose, in negotiations, recognize your triggers, don't rise to things. And I think that's very important in both building your confidence long term, but also in situations of negotiations, for sure.
I love that. That's great, great, great advice in knowing your brand. How do you build yourself a brand? You don't want to forget how to do that, because that's what will give you your core values and your negotiation strength. Because if you know what those are, you know um, they're not something you can just take lightly. They have to work with the position, the negotiation. It has to be based on your core values. So I love that. I think that's great. And knowing your emotions and how to control them is very, very important, because we never want to be in the situation where, somebody's thinking, oh no, she just started crying, and there's no
Yeah,
crying in business.
yeah,
And sometimes we put so much of our heart and soul into everything. That's why, the crying comes out and the emotions come out, but
yes.
really knowing how to control them and manage them, I think is very important. So you hit on some very, very important areas there. So thank you for that. Now, I think we talked a lot about confidence. I know women struggle with it, but anything else you want to add on how to build confidence? We talked a lot about
Yeah.
negotiation and confidence, building confidence, but anything you want to add?
Yeah, I would just say, and we sort of talked around, asking questions. I think what's really interesting is, and I've learned this over time, and I'm sure you have too, Jennifer, but
Mm-hmm.
in a room, if you have a question, 9 times out of 10, somebody else will have the same question. They're
Same
just not
question. Yep.
asking it.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so, I guess that's a key one. But also something I talk a lot about is comfort zones. And sort of learning age life is probably, it's getting quite deep now, but it's really about learning about yourself and what you're
Mm-hmm.
capable of, and that then again gives you the confidence. And I've always pushed myself outside of my comfort zone. I think it's important to recognize when you're okay in your comfort zone for a while, that you're kind of queen of all that you purvey, and kind of staying there for a while is the right thing to do, and it's comfortable. But you do have to push yourself outside of your comfort zone, and it is uncomfortable and it is really hard, but that's the only way that you can grow, kind of personally and professionally. So I would say that when projects are being given out, or there's tiger teams or secondments, or you know take one of those on, right? Particularly if they're cross-functional, it's how you grow. I think it shows initiative to your leader that you're taking
Mm-hmm.
on additional projects, and it really gives you confidence in your ability to to execute, want to push yourself beyond what you thought you were capable of. I would only caveat that with the fact that, like, women tend to, I think our instinct is to take as much on as we can to prove ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so the only caveat I would say is when you choose projects to take on, when you offer your time, um, make sure it's a project that's strategic, or that has kind of a leadership spotlight on it, whether you're leading that team or whether you're in that team. I think women can often take on so much that because we do multitask, and we do have a big capacity, but I think we sometimes overcommit, and
Mm-hmm.
often your core role can suffer because you're working on all these different projects.
Mm-hmm.
So do take on a project that allows you to grow, and that people are watching, has eyes on across the business, but just obviously be careful how much you take on, because it's in our nature to want to do
Say
more and
yes.
prove
Mm-hmm.
ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. Um, I love that you talked about, choosing your projects strategically and with leadership in mind, and helps you to grow, because really coming out of your comfort zone is so important to grow. It is where you grow, not in your
Mhm.
comfort zone, because if you're doing the same thing over and over again, you're comfortable in there and it feels like the right thing, but really come outside of that comfort zone. And that's really when you grow. So great, great points. Thank you for that. So Beth, who inspires you and why?
What, oh gosh, so many people from, I think a lot of things obviously start in our childhood, and my
Mm-hmm.
mum's always been a massive inspiration, as corny as that sounds. She was a career woman, which was, sort of in the 70s and 80s were, quite rare, really. She had, she had a solution consulting role, but she always had these side hustles, as I think we'd call them today. So she was making cheese, she was printing business cards, she was selling children's clothes. She was always busy, and she was this ball of energy. And so my mum had sort of inspired me from an early age. But I think if I look at, famous people, I just think Michelle Obama is an incredible human. She's, successful career woman, fought against the odds, to get the credibility and that amazing respect that she commands and deserves. And she's balanced all of that with being a mom, a wife, a philanthropist. I think she's a great role model. I think from a tech industry perspective, I followed a pretty amazing lady called Latani Canont for some time. I followed her on LinkedIn. She's CMO of Sixth Sense, but she's a really commercially oriented CMO who speaks so much sense around, buying behavior with enterprises today, and, her depth of experience, her deep understanding of what marketing's evolved into today, I found really inspirational.
I'd love to follow her. Yeah.
She's
I
great.
didn't know about her.
I'd love to have a really nice, she looks like quite a normal woman that you could probably have a nice lunch with as well. And I'd love to pick her brain and just have some time with her, because I think she'd be a pretty incredible mentor. I have to say, though, that my boss at the moment, Stefan Gassi, CMO of Nitro, I've worked with him a couple of times before. And you kind of learn over the years that, the tech industry is really, even though it's huge on a global scale, but it's actually quite small. Like, you'll find yourself working with
the
people,
same people over and over again.
Yeah.
I found that too. Yep.
And I've learned over my years to work my network, and I've worked with Stefan previously, and and I suppose it was a bit of a strategic decision, really, to work with him again, because he's somebody who reflects my values, and I learn from every day. And again, I think that's so important, looking for your role models, and finding people that aspire to similar values is so important, as role models and as a day-to-day inspiration. Humans learn, and a boss that you learn from is a really great find.
Really true. Yeah. And not the opposite, there's a lot of bosses that learn from you and then take credit for it, and that's not good. So when you do have one that you can learn from, it's amazing. Yeah, I agree. So why do you think a technology career is important for women today? What does it provide you in your career versus another, outside of technology?
Yeah, it's a really great question, because I didn't pick tech. Tech, I like to think, sort of picked me, but it was sort of an accident I fell into after university, and obviously I've been in the industry ever since, and I absolutely love it. I think for me as a marketer, the reason why I love tech is because it's very data. B2B is very data driven. I love data driven. I love the fact that it's the science kind of balanced with the art. But I think tech generally, the tech industry is so vast. And it's plays such an important role in our lives, particularly accelerated, obviously, by the pandemic, with digital transformation and everything moving at light speed, to become, for technology to kind of underpin absolutely everything we do. I talk to my kids about the tech industry, and they're like, "Bah, why would we want to go into that?" But for me, it's so exciting. It's so innovative. Everything changes. It's like the one constant thing in tech is that everything is going to change. And the innovation, and of course the charisma that attracts, makes it a really exciting industry to work in today. And yeah, I absolutely love it. I love its dynamic nature. I have to say, I haven't worked in any. I worked in plumbing very briefly when I left university, and I can say it's much more exciting than plumbing for
Yes.
sure.
That's great. Well, I love the points that you made, because counting on change. Change is a consistent. It's going to happen. It changes constantly, and it's like as soon as you think you got it, it's going to change.
Yeah.
So that always happens. And then really, it is an exciting industry. It's always dynamic. Things are moving so fast. I mean, I think back. I think 10 years ago, did I use technology the way I use it now? The answer is no. Now everything is dependent on technology. From the time I wake up to the time I go to bed, I have either my phone, my computer, everything. I'm connected all the time.
Yeah.
And that's good and bad in some cases, but still, it is important to see how technology is changing our lives, and it's really making a difference. And I think for women, it's a lucrative career too, because it pays well. And
Yes.
I think in many job roles, it can give you the flexibility to work from home, to come in and work for a couple days a week, if not, not at all. You can still make, the virtual world work for you. So I think there's a lot of benefits for women. So thank you for for calling them out.
My pleasure. It's an industry that's given me a lot, so I'm
Yes.
happy to advocate for it for sure.
Great. Well, what's your proudest professional moment? Can you describe it for us?
Do you know, I've been fortunate to have a lot, and a lot of ones, of course,
That's
that
really
I'm
good.
not so proud of. But
Mm-hmm.
I think probably my proudest moment was an old MD that I'd worked for at Ingram, actually in the UK. He
Mm-hmm.
moved to the Chinese Ingram and asked
Mm-hmm.
me to come over and do some consulting for him with his
Yes.
marketing team. It was amazing. It was a really amazing opportunity. And I was sort of late 20s, early 30s.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, I mean, talk about moving outside your comfort zone. I'd never consulted before, and I'd
Mm-hmm.
certainly never been to China or,
Mm-hmm.
halfway around the world with different culture to contend with and everything. So it was an amazing opportunity. It was
I'm
very
sure it
tough.
helped you grow. It helped you grow considerably, probably.
Absolutely. I mean, personally and professionally, right? Because I was traveling alone. I was living alone in
Mm-hmm.
this country, alien
Mm-hmm.
to me for a few months. Um, and I just had kind of this open brief to improve marketing outcomes and mentor the team. And it was hard, and I really had to give it a lot of thought, but it was such an incredible opportunity. And I suppose sort of what's driven me through a lot of my career is this, nothing beautiful grows from a comfort zone. I think you mentioned that earlier, and it sort of drove
Mm-hmm.
me on, I suppose. And
Mm-hmm.
I spent that 2 months over there, mentoring and strategizing, and left that marketing team with a legacy that they kind of continue to build on over the
That's
years. Like, I'm
awesome.
still in touch with some of them, which was great. And I kind of felt then that if I could cope with that, and there was a good outcome, then I kind of felt like I could cope with whatever was thrown at me in later
Mm-hmm.
years. And it
Mm-hmm.
it was a great foundation for my
That's
tech
awesome.
intro.
I'm so proud of you too, to
Yeah,
just take it
thank
on. You
you.
could have said no,
Yeah,
because it's not something you had done before, but that's just very impressive. And it's nice that they're still building on that legacy, and that should make you very proud.
I do. It does. It really does, actually. And I just worked with it was a lovely team over there in
Mm-hmm.
Shanghai, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just such a nice culture. They were so welcoming. So yeah, no, I am super proud of that, actually. Thank you.
That's great. You should be. Yeah, congratulations on that. So this is kind of a selfish question, because I always want to add to my bucket list of places to go. So what is your most favorite place that you've traveled to, and why?
Oh my God, this is totally my hot topic. I love travel. So,
I love
you
travel too.
oh, I know. I just wish I could do more of it. I've obviously traveled a lot for business, as I'm sure you
Hmm.
have, and I've been to
Hmm.
some amazing places with business, like St. Petersburg and places that I wouldn't have been
Hmm.
before. But in 2004, I took a year out of my career, so I sold my house,
Nice.
sold my car, traveled around the world for a year.
Oh, nice.
And I saw, oh gosh, I think it was 15, 16 countries. And we did South America, Southeast Asia, India. It was amazing. So it's a really
Oh,
tough
that's
one
amazing.
to
Yeah.
narrow down. I absolutely loved Peru. I loved New
Mm.
Zealand. But I think probably top of my list was Cambodia. Have you been to
Mm.
Cambodia?
No, I have not. I'm adding it. I'm writing it down.
Oh, do add
I
it to your
wrote down
list. It's
Peru and
incredible.
New Zealand as well. I have not been to either one of those. So, yes.
Ah, okay. Well, they are all incredible places. Cambodia has got to
So
be
tell
one
me
of them.
what's the memory that you have from Cambodia that makes it so wonderful?
It was, I think it's probably the most beautiful place on earth. So we went to see Angkor Wat, which is the big temple there, and we
Mhm.
watched it at sunrise, which is what all travelers
Oh,
do.
oh,
And seeing it's like the from Tomb Raider, the temples that they feature in those, it literally is like that with the most beautiful sunrise coming from
wow.
it. And there were monks that were based there that were kind of chanting. Oh my God, it was a real spiritual
Mm.
experience. But I think what I loved most is the people. They're really special. They've lived,
Mhm.
under Pol Pot's regime. It was in our lifetime. And they're very kind and very wise, and very resilient. So yes,
Mhm.
I would definitely recommend Cambodia.
Okay, I put it down. It's going to be added to my list. That
You must
sounds
share if you
amazing.
go.
And sunrises are now my new favorite thing. I used to always do sunsets, and then once I did a couple sunrises, I fell
Mm,
in love. It was just beautiful.
I know.
So yeah, and just gave me chills when you were talking about the monks chanting and the
Yeah.
sun rising. It's like, oh my God, that sounds amazing.
Ticks all your boxes then.
Yeah, it does. That's awesome. Well, this has been such an honor to have you on the show, and you've been such a delight to, just chat with, but learn so much from you. So, if you could share with our listeners any type of advice that you would give to a woman that would be thinking about a career in technology.
Yes, so I would say tech is a people industry.
Mhm,
So that we're full of big personalities, and whilst it is global, it is smaller than you think. You make a lot of
mhm,
connections. So
mhm,
grow your influence. Manage relationships up, down, across the company. But it is quite a small industry in the sense that you do know a lot of people, and you tend to meet the same people in the same circles. So absolutely build your network and
mhm.
work your network. So
Very
LinkedIn is
nice.
your best friend. Glassdoor is your best friend to understand about the companies. And then just try and maintain healthy relationships as a very
Mhm,
minimum.
mhm.
Because as I said before, your next boss might be somebody that worked for you in your last company. You never
Yeah,
know
you
who
never
you're going
know.
to meet. So
That's
so
right.
keep
Never
working
burn
those
bridges.
relationships. Yeah.
That's right. No, that's great, great advice. Oh, I love it. Yeah, and networks are so important. I think sometimes people underestimate the value of their network, but it's so critical to
Mm.
have a healthy, strong network because those are the people who'll be your champions and get you to advance your career as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Don't burn bridges.
Yes, yeah. And then in closing, can you share with our listeners how they can get a hold of you?
Yeah, I'm most often found actually on LinkedIn. I
Hmm.
spend probably an inordinate amount of time on the platform learning.
Hmm.
So anybody that's listening that'd like to connect, please find me on LinkedIn and connect in with me.
Sounds great. Well, Beth, this has been such an honor and a pleasure to have you on. Thank you for all your good work in supporting and advancing women's careers, because that's so important to us. And I really, really appreciate all your insights and information on this show. So thank you again.
It's my pleasure. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Tech in the Right Direction. Please take a minute to subscribe or follow so that you never miss an episode. Also, don't forget to like, share, and comment. Thank you. See you next week.
From IT skill enhancements to end user adoption training, Directions Training is your resource to help optimize the effectiveness of your technology investments. Over 500,000 students have taken advantage of our wide selection of technology and business training solutions covering the most popular applications today, such as Microsoft 365, Azure, Windows 10, and more. As a podcast listener, we invite you to take advantage of an exclusive offer. Receive 30 days of free access to our Microsoft official curriculum on-demand courses for IT professionals or end users. Visit us at www.directionstraining.com/podcast to claim this offer today. Hurry, this offer is only available for a limited time. Success is a journey. Ask for directions.